We're good. Welcome back, everybody, to Relevant Conversations in the Current Crisis. I appreciate you attending today. We have with us today Mr. Jim Holthouser with Focus Brands, LLC. Focus Brands is a holding company, so you may not be as familiar with the parent company's name, but it is a global multi-channel food service brand that has several brands underneath its umbrella, which includes some very recognizable names. You might recognize Moe's Southwestern Grill, McAllister's Deli, Jamba Juice, Cinnabon, Carvel, Auntie Anne's, and Slotsky's. So quite a few brands underneath that umbrella. Focus Brands is also a franchisor and operator of more than 6,000 restaurants, cafes, ice cream shops, and bakeries in the United States, and in the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and 50 foreign countries. So quite a extensive brand. Jim is the CEO. Prior to being the CEO of Focus Brands, Jim was with Hilton Worldwide. Started off in the feasibility and real estate group and moved up through the ranks there at Hilton. And prior to his retirement, or at the point of his early retirement, should I say, in January of 2018, Jim was executive vice president of global brands, marketing, loyalty at Hilton Worldwide, and was responsible for a $36 billion portfolio of 13 leading brands, covering more than 5,000 locations across 105 states. So quite a large responsibility. He directed the worldwide marketing, product development, owner relationships, 75 million member Hilton Honor guest program. And additionally, under his tenure there, he launched an additional 5 hotel brands. The most successful brand launch among those 5 of the 100-year history of Hilton at the time is at the same time also instituted very high-impact digital innovations and apps across the entire system. So quite a bit of a range of experience here for Jim. And Jim, I just want to bring to your attention too, he's a Kentucky boy. Grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, went to the University of Louisville and graduated with a BA and I think an MBA or a master's at Louisville as well in economics and political science. Jim, I'm very excited about having you on the program today. I know you bring an enormous amount of experience to the table. You've got international business, franchising experience, brand management, global product development, among some of the best known brands in the industry. So we're glad that you're here and you're willing to kind of share your story and insight in a section that we have talked about entitled Emerging Stronger Post COVID-19. So we're really excited and anxious to have you with us today. So I appreciate so much you being willing to share that time with us, because I know you don't have anything on your plate right now.
No, not much, but thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, good. I tell you, I know a little bit about what your days were like when Hilton, because we've known each other for a while, and I know that we kind of kept up as you made this new move, being the CEO of Focus Brands. And so I knew a little bit about what you were going to have to dive into when you got there, but I am sure, given COVID-19 and the rapid, just the epidemic and the pandemic as it rose, obviously changed your days and kind of reshaped your days. So how have those changed as we begin the program?
Yeah. Well, put it this way: I'm not exactly working on what I thought I would be working on in the first couple of months. What I would say is, I started looking at this opportunity last November, and so I started in kind of the middle of February, right? So I'd say within the first couple of weeks went pretty well, right? I actually was in an office building with people, and people were coming to work, and I was doing what new CEOs do. You're trying to learn as much as you can and meet as many people as you can.
Right.
And then really by week 3, the bottom starts to fall out, right? So we actually had a COVID-19 case in our office. So that was we discovered that on a Friday. By Monday, we have about 900 people working from home, right?
Wow.
So we had to pivot there very quickly. And then I would say in the following week, in week 4, I was on the job. Basically, my CFO came to me and said, if we keep spending money at the current rate, our revenues keep coming in at the current rate, well, guess what? We're going to be out of money in about 2-3 months. So, yeah, many of us have been in those situations, and as unpleasant as it is, you know what you got to do, right? And so you start implementing hiring freezes, and we had to make some very hard calls on furloughs and layoffs to stabilize the company. And again, those are, I don't want to make that sound like it's an like an academic exercise, because it's actually extremely tough to do when you're messing with people's lives and their livelihoods. But so that was the very next week, and then the following week after that, I mean, basically we're knee deep, like you and so many on the webinar are, in these PPP loans and helping your franchisees and helping them stabilize their business. So yeah, it was at this point, I really thought I'd be preparing for board presentations, and I'd be working on my 5-year roadmap, and I guess to some degree I am, but there are just a few distractions along the way.
Yeah, just a few, but we've talked about before, and we've had several conversations even in the past about opportunity and crisis, and things that interestingly enough give rise to some thinking that you may not have had otherwise had you not been faced with this crisis in the very, very front end. So we do know it's an opportunity. So I'd kind of like to talk about the opportunities that you think that this poses. I think given the fact that you're in a leadership position, several people that are on this call and maybe attending this, we're going to have quite a wide range of people who are listening to us right now, that range from everyone who's a small business owner who's really trying to man the ship themselves with a few employees, upward of those who have several employees at their helm, larger businesses. And of course, you're in a leadership position. So in times of crisis like this, kind of everybody, all eyes are kind of pointed toward you. So kind of step me through, how you kind of had to evolve very quickly into that role there with Focus Brands, and the kind of things that you knew that you had to corral and kind of bring to command in order to navigate this.
Yeah, and again, I think whatever I've learned from from experiences like this, I mean, I think they basically apply across all industries and businesses. It doesn't matter what your role is in a company. I mean, I think these things apply. I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, I've been through a few of these, as you have, as many on the webinar have. I mean, we've all lived through the likes of 9/11. We went through a financial crisis in 08 and 09. We've dealt with the odd recession here and there, right? So this isn't too terribly different from any other crisis that you're going to face as you run a company, you manage a function in a company. So as I said, the first and foremost, you got to bolt the company down financially and make sure it's on sure footing, right? So you have to really bring your spending and your revenues into balance very, very fast. I mean, as you know, as a CPA, I mean, cash is the oxygen for a company, right? And if when it runs out of oxygen, the patient dies. So that really has to be your first focus. And then secondly, what leaders do at that point is you really amp up the communication. Hopefully you're communicating along the way. That's what good leaders do. But this is where you've really got to amp up how often you talk to people and be very mindful about what you tell them. Their world is, I mean, a lot of people are in freak out mode. Our franchisees, their stores were, the traffic was way off. Some of them were having to close. As I said, we're having to furlough and lay off people. So, your world and the people you're responsible for were a little bit in freak out mode. So I'd say the first thing is, as you amp that communication up, you got to be very honest and transparent. And that was particularly true for me because I was brand new, and I didn't really even have a chance to establish a relationship with all these, with all my constituents. And so I would say just transparency, treat them like adults, and you don't need to sugarcoat. You just need to be honest with people about what you're facing. The second thing I would say is I've over-indexed on expressing my gratitude for people, and given how we're asking them to work these days, and I try to show as much humanity as I know how. So very quickly after our furloughs and our layoffs, I made sure people understood that I didn't look at people as names in boxes on an org chart, right? It meant a lot more to me, and that at the end of the day, I mean, I was emotionally affected probably the same way they were, right? So they just need to know that, right? You need to show that you're human too. But probably more important than anything is, leaders are purveyors of hope. And as I said, the people who count on you need a lot of reassurance when you go through a pandemic or a financial crisis or a 9/11 situation. They just do. And so so even though I don't have every single answer, I mean, I've lived through enough of these. I do know we will come out the other end. We will emerge stronger, and it's just a matter of navigating our company through this as adroitly as I know how to do. So I would say again, so transparency, show your humanity, and then again offer as much reassurance and hope as is realistic as you can, right? And then communicate very, very, very frequently. So I've been doing that now for a good month, and the feedback is good. I feel like people are, they've come to grips with it. They've calmed down. We can now focus on the business at hand. So I think that's working really well. And then I think the final thing I would say is, we can't control what goes on in the economy. We can't control whether or not we experience a pandemic now or in the future. All we can really control is how we react to it.
Right.
So what I would say is my advice to everyone, and again, I'm preaching to myself as much as I am to everybody else, is you need to look for the silver lining and try to extract whatever advantage, the situation, you can find in the situation. So, for me, being brand new, I've still got a very, very steep learning curve in this industry, but as I step back, it gave me some advantages I may not would have had otherwise. So, for example, I really got to watch my executive team rally. I got to watch how they perform under stress, and to be honest, I was amazed at how well they did. I mean, this team was able to pivot and start a level of innovation, support our franchisees in a way that I may not have really understood for months, or if not even years. So I would say, so again, it helped me, understand the team a lot better. And, it gave me an opportunity to start establishing relationships with our franchisees. I mean, they also need, they need a lot of reassurance. They need a lot of counsel. These are small business owners, right? And the rug has just been pulled out from underneath them, right?
Yeah.
So the nice thing is not only have I accelerated that relationship, but at the end of the day, I think because of how we've handled it, and again, we've amped up the communication level of support. Again, ushered in a lot of different kind of innovation in the restaurants. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're banking a lot of goodwill, and I can't put a dollar and cent number on that as you could as a CPA, but
I'm not sure I could either.
Yeah, but all I know is that will pay dividends, down the road. As I said, another silver lining in all this has allowed us to, as I said, to pivot and innovate at a speed and with a sense of urgency that we may not have had otherwise. So one of the things that your audience may or may not want to know is the restaurants that are obviously the ones that are in malls are really very hard hit, right? Because malls are closed. On the other hand, the restaurants that are kind of freestanding and that have a drive-through with them, they have been less severely hit, right? People can drive in and you don't need to go in, and there's minimal contact with people and all the good stuff. So we have a ton of restaurants though that are like in strip centers, right? They don't have drive-throughs, and so what you'll find in a lot of places are we've shown them how to build makeshift drive-throughs, right, in a strip center using materials you can buy from at Costco or Walmart. You got the orange cones, and you got a tent, and you got a runner, and you know what, it's working. A lot of the other thing in food service is about 75% of your revenue comes during the lunchtime, the lunch hours, and about 25% of it comes at night, right? Well, in today's world where people aren't in offices, they're at home, that's exactly flip-flop now, right? So the team, they've been able to pivot. So they're now offering, like family size meals, taco kits. You can now at McAllister's, you can buy meat by the pound and large, servings of the sides that can feed, 4 or 5 people. 4 weeks ago, we weren't in that business, right?
Right.
We weren't in that business, and this isn't how we did business. But again, it's just amazing to me how fast, the world can, we in business can pivot and change when we need to.
Yeah.
And then I kind of shudder to think what the P&L might look like had we not done that, right? So you were going to say something.
Well, as you mentioned, getting into areas that you hadn't necessarily been in before, whether that's, you've got the store that's kind of anchored in the strip that doesn't have the drive-through. I've even noticed some restaurants now are offering grocery services. I mean, I just noticed, sorry to mention a competitor, but Panera, until I logged on to their website the other day, I didn't even realize that they are offering now a grocery service. And you just think that's just something they would have never had to think about before. So you guys are having to really innovate. But I want to back up on a few things. I mean, you're giving us a wealth of stuff here, but let's circle back around on a couple of things that I think are really, really key that you mentioned, especially as it relates to, well, the first item that you mentioned was getting your financial house in order, having to bolt, as you called it, you have to bolt the company down, and you realize that cash, you're on a limited supply of oxygen if you're going to have to continue to operate the way you are, unless you otherwise pivot and innovate. Has this kind of got you to, I mean, I think most businesses are having to rethink this issue of reserves. What do we, I think these are moments like now that it's like insurance. You pay for insurance, you pay for insurance, you pay for insurance, and you hate how much you pay for it until you need it. And, kind of rethinking the model of cash and the deployment of cash and how long you might want to hold on to it. It might cause you to remeasure your runway than what you had previously, because in the day in which you're making hay, you don't think about it running out. Yeah. So has it caused you to think, along those lines about how you would better position the company financially moving forward? And especially if this curve is flat and we're in an extended period?
Yeah. I would say, in all honesty, I walked into a company that's been very, very well managed financially, right? So its cash reserves were substantial. And had this been, I'd say a recession that was creeping up on us very quickly, that it really wouldn't have been a problem, right? Because we would have had time to pivot. If you were dealing with a natural disaster like a hurricane or something, right? Whose magnitude is much smaller, right? I think what's caught a lot of businesses off guard is just the magnitude of this and the rapidity with which it's happened, right? And so it's in our case, there's plenty of good cash reserves. The important thing is to make sure you've got lines of credit established, right? Because you may have to supplement very quickly.
Yeah, and I think even in these moments, you learn the lesson that you get those lines of credit established before a crisis.
Correct.
It's more easy to get those things before there's a need for them. And I learned that when I was at the helm of Midway as their CFO. You ask for things in advance. There's a couple of moments there when I was even at Midway that we just wasn't sure how long that runway was, and we kind of stabilized things. We got things under control. Cash, we had at least redeployed some things that were generating some cash, but I wasn't quite sure. There's 3 months down the road that I didn't know what was going to happen. So you ask for those lines of credit, and sometimes people look at you crazy, like, well, what are you saying? And you just say, well, I need that in reserve just in case I have to have that as an emergency. So I think we're learning a lot of those kind of general business applications and lessons in this whole thing. And for those who have been depleted of cash, I mean, it's really taught them the lesson to kind of rethink about having that cash reserve in position so that they can be nimble, they can pivot, and they don't become so short-sighted. Because I think in a crisis like this, it's really easy. The most challenging task, I think, and especially that faces a leader in this moment and trying to be an agent of change and things like that, is most people make the mistake of trying to navigate more on this short-term basis, and they lose sight of this, what's going to happen down the long term. And so they're less likely to innovate because they're so focused on surviving today, or they're so focused on surviving this week. You had kind of shared with me before you're not just looking at the here and now. I mean, even in a crisis like this, when we have a vacuum of business, that doesn't mean we can't be proactively looking ahead and preparing for that future. So what are you guys doing as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, I'd also put that under the idea of a kind of a silver lining, right?
Right.
Right now, I'd say we're doing a couple things. First of all, this industry has been very hard hit. In fact, both industries I've spent the bulk of my career in, the hotel industry and the restaurant industry, they've all been hit pretty severely by all this. But once we had control over our financial house, once I knew our franchisees were in good shape, our brands were very focused, we're doing the right kind of innovation. Basically, this has allowed me to do a couple things. Number one, it's allowed me to really think about more strategic pursuits with this company. How, what's the optimal way to structure it, for its future. We're dusting off and thinking about our M&A target lists. We're working on our new, a lot of new marketing capabilities that need to be built in the company, right? So I'm using this time while the industry is kind of hunkered down, right? Competition is asleep, and I'm using this to kind of get my own, a 5-year plan together, and then and I've got the luxury of time that I normally may not have. As you've heard me say before, it's a lot easier to do repairs on the bus if the bus isn't moving, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. And then kind of the second thing I would say is, again, your competition is asleep right now, right? People are distracted, they're hunkered down, and now's the time to get creative. So I was talking to my development guys the other day, and I said, we have 1,900 franchisees in this company, a lot of relationships. These are entrepreneurs. These are people of action. I mean, they're used to being busy and creating and building things, right? And they're all stuck home, right? And they're just pacing like a caged animal. I said, you know what? We have these incredible stories to tell about our brands. Let's do a webinar series, and we'll invite them to lunch on us. So the first one, we have 200 prospective owners that really aren't doing business with us signed up, right, to hear the story on some of our brands. So again, we may not have had that opportunity, right, in kind of quote unquote normal times. So this is we're extracting the best, we're extracting the opportunities that we can from an otherwise pretty dire situation.
Well, and that's true. I mean, we get so focused and we get so ingrained in having to deal with the day to day. And of course, as long as the economy's booming, as long as, again, we're making hay while the sun still shines, all hands are on deck. We're moving at full throttle. And that's most business clip, as far as that's concerned. There's no time to think a lot of times. There's no time to innovate. There's no time to really improve and test. But now that the brakes are on, you finally have that time, like it or not. So you might as well use it. And it sounds like you guys are really trying to take advantage of this downtime. And as I understand it, you have a president that's kind of over each brand. Is that correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, you're ultimately at the helm, and you're the leader, you're the CEO. And then you said something that I really respect. You said, I don't have all the answers. And I think that's an important acknowledgement right now, because I think there's two questions that people tend to want to ask during this time, and they're looking for you to get the answer to it. And one of them is just really simple. Where are we?
Right.
And, where are we going to go from here? And it really boils down to just those two. Just about any other question that you might throw in the mix probably could fit under one of those two categories.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier, you just tell this unvarnished truth. You really just kind of roll it out there, and you make sure everybody understands the implications of things, which is really, really critical. And so you're going to tell them like it is, because they need to deal with reality. I think that's, we need to deal with reality. We understand it, but we're doing so with purpose. We're doing so with hope, because hope really is the foundation of all change. So you said that you're a purveyor of hope and reassurance, right? So those nine people that you have at that helm, you don't have all the answers, but as the leader, you know there are answers, right? And you know where to get them. So explain the dynamic of that group now as you guys kind of are facing this. You know, you and each of your brands are a little different. Yeah, they're all inside that, that hospitality, food service, but you even acknowledge they're in different locations, different types of venues, whether they're freestanding, mall, strip mall. How are those nine heads coming together, and how are you bringing those nine heads together to kind of think this out loud?
Well, as I said, as you said, there are really two questions. You've got to, you don't have to know all the answers, but at the same time, you are responsible for having the answers, right?
Right.
And honestly, there's no magic to this. It's surrounding yourself with incredible people, right? And that the further I've gone up the chain in business, right, the more humbling I find it, because I am dealing with somebody, whatever topic we're talking about, I'm dealing with somebody who knows more about the topic we're talking about than I do, right? And my job then is really just to kind of put this through the filter of the business, right? I don't have to have all the answers, right? But you've got to have the people around you who do. Luckily, I've got these nine brands report up to just a dynamo chief operating officer. She and I are extremely polished and knowledgeable about this business. So she and I have been spending a lot of time together because I'm new to this industry, right? I've got a lot to learn, and she knows relationships. I've got a lot of people to meet, and a lot to prove to people, right? So yeah, and then basically it's really been her job to corral the nine, to make sure we're sharing best practices. I mean, the seven, make sure we're sharing best practices. And if there's a great idea in one brand, well, we want to make sure that they're coming together. These executives are talking, and we're able to take something that works in here and transplant it to another brand. So, yeah, they spend a lot of time together, and it's kind of cool how they all feed off each other.
Well, that's a great thing to have, and I think a lot of people would probably envy the fact that within your holding company, you have those figureheads, and you have those people of experience to be able to come together and collaborate.
Yep.
So when we're dealing with the small business world, okay, they don't have that internal, maybe they don't have that internal division to where they can really bounce things off of someone else with inside the organization. Although I think I would say, with a caveat, that you would even want to look down to the lowest common denominator, because sometimes the lowest common denominator can have some really good ideas and fresh ideas too. So don't discount the janitor, I guess, is what I would be saying there, because there was a business that I wouldn't say a business I got to know. I was living in Kansas City at the time, and I got to know a guy who I ended up developing a tremendous amount of respect for. And I would say his background was as blue collar as they come. And he was a truck driver at one point in time, and he drove for a food service company. And he started seeing things within the company, started getting some ideas, but he was very discounted because of his position. He was just a driver. Well, he finally bought his way into the company enough and saved into the company enough that they kind of gave him this nominal seat on the board. He ended up owning the company, and it ended up being a huge company, and AmeriServe came in and bought the whole company out and then put him at the helm for the next 5 years.
Wow.
So here's the truck driver inside that company who had good ideas that ended up putting him in the driver's seat, literally, of the company, and then getting bought out by one of the largest food servicing companies in the United States. And he serviced so many restaurants west of the Mississippi. It was incredible.
Yep.
But he was really humble about it, and he had really good ideas. But he also knew he wasn't the only one that had all the answers to it. So for these small business owners that are out here, guys that I'm dealing with too, that may not have the internal, the internal experience, I guess I should say, what would you encourage them to do? How can they, what's their workaround for that, do you think?
I've always been a big believer, and I think this dovetails perfectly with your story. I mean, I think we can all, you learn from all kinds of people, right? Everybody you meet has something they can teach you, right? And it's just a matter of taking the time and being humble enough to be open to whatever they have to say. if I'm running a small business, I can certainly learn from my peers in the industry. I can learn from my customers, right? I can learn from my financial advisors. You don't need to have chief operating officers and in a complex infrastructure of a big corporation around you, right? But we all have mentoring relationships. And people we trust in our lives. There are lots of ways of going and getting perspective and answers. I don't think you don't need to be a big corporation to kind of have a network, if you will.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think that's an important point. That collaborative spirit I saw in several places. So even when I was with the university, I think one of my most memorable things about that, besides the fact that it was such a grind and almost killed me, just the number of hours that was required to handle that job, the reprieve that I had and I look forward to every time was of the existing at that time 26 private universities and private colleges that were in the state of Kentucky at the time. All the CFOs got together every quarter and just had this day that they spent together and had a round table and had a few topics they talked about. And the very end of the day was everybody putting out their, in a way, dirty laundry on the table saying, I'm facing this crisis. I'm facing that. How do you overcome this? How do you overcome that? And there were things I certainly had never faced, never having really been at the helm of any higher education institution before. So in some respects, that was good because I brought an outside perspective into an environment that wasn't used to that kind of perspective. But in a way, it was bad because I was also hamstrung by some things I just didn't have experience with. Right. I always looked forward to that quarterly meeting because it was the most collaborative group I think and we were all rivals. Every one of us were rivals, but it was the most collaborative group I've ever been involved with in my life. And I don't know that I would have survived in that experience had it not been for that. So I think your point is right. You've got financial advisors, you've got other people in your lives, you've got other small business owners that aren't necessarily your competitors. But I would even say, if you know anything about Simon Sinek or his latest book on the infinite game, I'm not sure there's ever a more perfect time for a book than that one. It kind of arrived on the shelf right before this whole outbreak happened. And he's got a whole section on there about a worthy rival. It's not a competitor, it's a worthy rival. What are the takeaways? Look outside the box. Look at even your competitor who you would normally, or the person who you would normally look at as a competitor, and instead look at them as a rival that probably have some strengths that are your weaknesses, and they have some weaknesses that are your strengths, and be willing to look at all those takeaways. So I think that's pretty important for our small business owners, that they, at more time than any right now, they need to surround themselves with people who can help them think through this. Yep. And they need to form that group and that network and that collaboration so that they can learn to maybe innovate and think, because they might not have that internal depth to be able to do that. So I think that's incredibly important.
When I was in the years ago, when I got out of grad school and I got into the hotel business, as you said, I started out in feasibility and real estate and started doing market research and some marketing roles. Anyway, I kept moving around. But by the time I started running businesses for the company, I was probably one of the very few people who'd never worked in a hotel. And to this day, I had a 30-year career in the hotel business. I've never worked a single day in the hotel business. But by the time I got in there, right, I was looking for something. I wasn't looking for working at a front desk anymore, right? I had my MBA. I was ready to move on with things, so I kind of missed that window. And I always felt that was a little bit of a disadvantage. But what I learned is to surround myself with people who had been there. They knew the language. They knew the culture of a hotel. And so for a number of years, I wouldn't send anything out to the hotels that I didn't have someone who'd been there read for me. So I learned, right? And part of it was just but you have to have enough humility to realize what you know and what you don't, and then and figure out how to supplement it.
Yep. Well, I think that's the kind of thing that we want to try to provide, as we take some of our prior experience and leadership and things like that, and really help these businesses understand that they don't have to completely depend on themselves during this crisis. Kind of the whole point of even this environment and forum that I'm trying to create online here is more of that community think out loud, have some resources that you look forward to coming to, get some takeaways, and see where you can go with it. And big or small, I think, as I'm hearing you talk out loud about the things, not only with your experience, but your leadership and the things that you guys had to do, that's not unique to a big company. That's what, big or small, it's the same steps in a way.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yep.
So,
Good point.
so this thing about crisis, we've talked to, I think you had mentioned before the quote from Winston Churchill. You have to remind me exactly what the quote was, because I know you're more of the historical reader. I know a little bit about Winston Churchill, but you probably have the quote better than I do. What was his quote?
Yeah, no. The quote is, it goes something along, never let a good crisis go unwasted. And a lot of people think that Rahm Emanuel said that. Actually, he stole that from Churchill. So
right. Well, and I think that the context to that statement was I think he made that statement at the time in which you had Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill coming together against a common enemy, and from which came the United Nations, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's an unlikely trio to put together, to end up having something that was creating a greater good. So, one of the lessons, from that statement is, if it weren't for a crisis, you may not have those opportunities.
Right.
Of course, the pessimist is going to look at the opportunity and see the difficulties. And I think Winston Churchill even made that comment, whereas the optimist is going to look at the difficulties and see the opportunities.
Yep.
So it's really a matter of perspective and how you do that. And even though the crisis is really a hard pill to swallow right now, the harder pill to swallow is if you don't do anything while you have the time to think about it.
Right.
And,
that's a good point.
Really work on it.
Yes.
At this point.
Yep.
So it's a time to create opportunity. And, it's not just looking for opportunity, but create opportunity. It's a time to be patient. To look, I like your idea of this. You got to look for the silver lining. You got to look for the takeaway, because I think your employees are looking for that. They're looking for that reassurance. They're looking for that hope. And that's really kind of foundational to even accepting the change that we're all going to have to swallow, that we're going to live. And I think I heard Mark Cuban mention it this way, and I hadn't thought about it before. If you think about the evolution of the internet, how we had the web 1.0 and we had the web 2.0. Well, he's talking about we're now going to live and have to face the world 2.0. Right. So it's definitely going to be a different world. So what are you seeing on the other side of this? What changes might you be seeing in the landscape of your industry?
Yeah. I'm spending a lot of time, I'm sure, as many on the WebEx are, is just trying to understand how the world will be different. We know it will be different. It was different after 9/11. It was different after the financial crisis, right? And this is going to be new too. I think for this industry, I think it's a number of things. I think we're training right now 350 million people in this country to interact with restaurants very differently than they've typically interacted. So, in the past, you'd either go through a drive-through or you go into the restaurant and order your food, right? And you took it or you left, right? Well, now you've got, third-party delivery is growing like gangbusters. You're having we over the last month we've invented curbside delivery. We have something called dispatch. Like most restaurant companies today, they'll have apps, and restaurants are now delivering food, right? To their customers' homes. So we're training 350 million people in this country to interact very differently, and they're all sitting home. They can't go out, right? and so all these new tools, right? They're learning how to use them. Mm-hmm. So there are just massive implications for the kind of digital tools that this industry will need in the future, right? Other implications are, you may not need as much in-room dining space, right? Because people are consuming your product in greater proportion outside of the four walls of the restaurant, right? And anyway, it kind of goes on like this. A lot of the menu innovation we've seen, I mean, it's proven to be so popular. I don't see these family options going away. I mean, they're
Yeah.
popular. So yeah, this world is going to be very different. Now on the other hand, I mean, some things I believe will go back. I mean, I think there's so much pent up demand for travel and for restaurants, right? I think it's going to come, when it comes back, it's going to come back pretty big. Do
you see that as a temporary comeback? Yeah, I mean, do you see? I think people are going to be so starved that you'll see this initial surge of all kinds of activity come back.
Yeah.
Do you think that's sustained activity, or do you think that's just a?
No, I think first of all, I do think it's going to come roaring back, and we'll put it this way: the mall businesses, I think it's going to be very gradual, right? People are going to be very skeptical about going any place where they're concentrating. Right. Yeah, but what we call the quick service restaurants. I think people are hungry. No pun intended. Right, to eat out other than something that you're cooking yourself. I mean, typically what you find is, and this has been a trend in the country for a good decade. We measure all of food expenditure by consumers in the country, and the first cut is what proportion of that goes to grocery stores versus what goes to restaurants. And as consumers are increasingly time starved, right, you'll see that mix, decreasing for grocery stores and then in favor of restaurants, right? So it's a very high growth business, right? Well, in the last month, that's completely flip flopped, right? So your grocery chains they're making hay right now, right? I don't think, once people get back to work, I mean, we're going to be just as time starved as we were as we went into this thing. So things like that, I think I would expect those kind of trends to continue. But in terms of how people order and how and where they consume the product, I think that was already changing. It's just going to accelerate that change, I think, and thanks to this pandemic.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time. We got just a few minutes left, so I guess, I mean, there's so much we could talk about, and I know in past conversations we get pretty jazzed up, and before we know it, time has flown. So I'd love to even extend this even beyond that, and maybe we'll have to circle back around to another session, because there is so much to talk about with this kind of topic. But you did, I think, a couple of things that I want to end on. And one I want to end on is just, I think it's always interesting when we're dealing with anybody who comes on to kind of share their insight and share their stories. Just kind of one of their biggest personal takeaways out of this whole thing. I mean,
yeah.
What's one of your biggest personal takeaways out of this?
Well, again, I would just say, I think we've touched on these ideas, and it's number one, I get great joy in learning and I get joy in honing my skills, right? And I've just looked at this opportunity as yet one more opportunity to hone leadership and to learn and make an impact on a business, and hopefully I can do that a lot faster than I normally would have been able to do. So I guess really what I'm saying is what I'm trying to do is extract the value out of a pretty dire situation. I'm trying to turn it into something. I'm trying to turn this into an advantage, right? And then the second thing is just like everyone on this WebEx, I will be reading the papers and magazines and talking with smart guys like Mark Wadlington, and just to kind of figure out, right, I've got to understand what this pandemic means for life in this country and business, and because it's my job to stay, to try to stay 3 and 4 steps in front of it, and to understand it before everybody else does. So that's my mind will be very much geared towards that question: is what exactly is going to change, and what does that mean for me and my business?
Yeah. Well, on a final note, there was a quote I saw the other day, and it's by a guy by the name of Winifred E. Newman. And I really don't know who this gentleman is. I probably should have done a little bit more research. But you had mentioned the one thing I think is so critical of leadership, which is you're the purveyor of hope and reassurance. So I kind of want to end on that note. And for you to think about this quote, because I think it really sums up a driver to this situation that everybody needs to try to hang on to with everything they have. And he said this, he said, there are no hopeless situations, only people who think hopelessly.
Yep.
And I thought that's a perfect capstone, to what we're talking about.
Yep.
Because that if we really want change and we really want to get through, not only to change ourselves, but to change our business and as a means of survival, and to get through this other end, having emerged much stronger than we were having gone into it, I think we have to adopt that mentality that this is not a hopeless situation. But I will limit myself if I get engaged in hopeless thinking.
Yep.
And I think you've helped us today realize that we can overcome that helpless thinking. And it's easy. It's an easy default. And it's an easy default. But we really have to push hard to learn to think differently on that. So I appreciate so much, you taking the time, because I know your schedule is incredibly busy with the wide range of people who you are responsible for. So thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate you taking that time. Appreciate you sharing those personal stories. I look forward to getting to catch up with you a little bit later. And I know the audience has very much appreciated you being here too. Any final words? I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, because we've had a really good relationship through the years, and it's even grown closer these last several months that we've had. And we've certainly bounced a lot of things off each other. And I appreciate you being there in my life for sure.
Yep.
So
Well, you're so welcome. And again, it's my pleasure. And, Mark Wadlington is one of these guys I will walk over hot coals with bare feet. So again, I'm delighted to be here, and look forward to tuning in and hearing other folks who may be tuned in, and again, learning from them and hearing their stories. So
yeah.
Thanks
Well,
for
Jim, thanks for sharing yours. And we hope that you have a good rest of the day. And I look forward to seeing how you guys continue to adapt and grow strong as a company. And I'm anxious to see where things go for you guys as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for attending today. We'll make the session available on YouTube. If it was that you had to drop out a little early, we'll make this available to you, as well as on Facebook. Everybody have a great rest of the day. And let's put our confidence in the hope that I think that's set before all of us. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.